Winter hides the cruelest things. Under the snow, behind the glass, inside the places we swear are safe. This family thought their Christmas magic came from laughter and light. They were wrong. It came from something older, something carved, something patient. Lean close, my dark hearts, and listen to the tale of the toy every child trusted, and the one child who shouldn't have. Rule 1, the wall and the first nudge. The attic hatch yawned open like a mouth in the ceiling. Amy eased a green tote down the ladder, arms trembling, dust softening her hair with grey. The house was too new to be theirs yet. Bare walls, stacked boxes, the faint tang of rolled-on promises. Mason hovered below, vibrating in small, excited lines. He didn't wait for permission. He dragged the tote across the carpet, already peeling the lid. The plastic popped, and the stale scent of old plastic and fake pine exhaled. His shoulders stilled. "Mom," he said softly. "Look, it wasn't theirs." Nestled in newspaper, a wooden elf, a foot tall, carved from wood so dark it swallowed light. It sat with legs straight, hands flat on its knees, head tilted a fraction to the right, as if listening to a voice behind the noise. The eye hollows were deep, the varnish pooled at their bottoms kept a wet look, and the mouth, thin, patient, certain. "Did you buy this?" Mason asked. "No," Amy said. Grief had thinned her patience and sharpened her edges. A move. A silence where voices used to be. Maybe the last owners. "Can we keep him? Just for this year?" Timmy's mom moves theirs every night. She should have said no. She wanted to hold a normal ritual in her hands, just once. If they call, it goes back. For now. Mantle. He lifted it with a grunt, heavier than it looked. He set it between two empty hooks. The elf faced the room, legs out, hands on knees, head tipped, listening. "Perfect," Mason said. "Creepy," Amy said, but she smiled while they fought the tree into shape. Light cables knotted, plastic needles shed. The elf never moved, or if its head leaned a hair toward the hall, no one marked the angle. Not yet. The house thinned to evening. TV murmured. A bill glared up from Amy's phone. She rubbed her eyes until the numbers blurred. Skruck. Crayon on wall. Skruck. She stepped into the hall. Mason's hand dragged a wax-red line through wild green loops already tangled across the paint. He froze mid-stroke. "Mason." Her voice snapped without aiming to. He pulled his hand back like from a burner. I didn't. Don't," she said. "Don't say you didn't while I'm watching you do it." Color climbed the wall in a fevered band 3 feet high. "I wasn't going to," he said. "I just picked it up and then you drew all over the wall. Be rent. It wasn't my, don't say the elf." He flinched. Still, he glanced over his shoulder. The mantle sat calm in the living room's glow. Crayon shavings dusted the threshold. The red crayon had rolled in from the living room, its paper peeled in nervous spirals. "You know better," Amy said, hand open. "Crayon." He gave it over. Shoulders shook. He left it on the floor. He whispered, "Right by my hand. He's wood," Amy said. "You made a choice. Bad one. Get a rag in the cleaner. You never believe me. Because you're blaming furniture. Go." He trudged off, wiping his eyes. Amy moved to grab a sponge and stopped. On the mantel, the elf sat where he'd been placed, except the head. Not much, just enough to angle toward the hallway, toward the mess, toward where Mason's small back had been. A thread of cold slid below her ribs. Had it always leaned like that? Memory is a fogged mirror when you need it clear. "You're tired," she told herself. She reached up and scented its head. The wood bit cold. As she let go, she felt a faint tap inside the chest, a bead rolling in a hollow. She snatched her hand back. Whatever. They scrubbed until the red died to pink. The furnace hummed its uneven line. Night settled like frost inside the drywall. Amy slept the way exhausted people fall, hard and graceless. No human hand moved. On the mantel, the elf turned its head. Hollow eyes fixed on the narrow dark where the hole began. The first rule took root. Watching isn't passive. Watching selects, measures, presses. If you catch a child in a wrong, something old believes it can press again. Amy dreamed of numbers. Mason stared at his ceiling and felt the air shift. The hallway cooled with presence, not weather. The light at its edge learned to hesitate. A watcher learned its first lesson. The soil remembers, and so do houses. Rule 2, the cookie and the opened hallway night took the house in slow bites. The tree blinked itself drowsy. The furnace stitched a crooked hum along the baseboards. Omi fell hard into sleep, the kind that erases edges. The rooms held their breath, but not for peace. Suction pop. The fridge seal broke with a clinical little kiss. White light spilled down the hallway, thin as a blade. Amy pushed upright, irritation riding the pulse. Mason? Her voice stayed low, because night has rules. The rules didn't answer. She reached the kitchen doorway and stopped. He stood inside the glow, pajamas catching crumbs, a cookie halfway to his mouth. He froze mid-bite. The cookie fell and broke like a tiny bone on linoleum. I wasn't, he started, panic already knotting his tongue. Look. On the counter, beside the open fridge, sat the elf. Legs out, hands on knees, and in those neat wooden palms, centered with religious care, a whole cookie, sugar unbothered by the cold. You ate one because a toy had one. Amy tried for scold and found thinness. It felt like permission, he whispered. Like, if he has one, then I may. Wood can't give permission, she said. But the kitchen's cold sank into her wrist bones as if disagreeing. Back to bed. He shuffled past, shame hanging off him like wet cloth. She reached for the elf to put it back, then flinched. The wood was colder than the room. Not fridge cold, grave cold. She set it on the mantel with careful fingers and told herself not to be ridiculous. The house stilled again, but the stillness had a new shape. In the living room, the elf's right arm lifted a fraction, a carved hand rising into the dark, like a semaphore only the hallway could read. Second rule, a watcher becomes permission. The floorboards learnt a new tongue. Not settling, not wind, wait. A careful heel to toe that tested balance and remembered the gaps. It stopped just beyond Mason's door and lingered. He wasn't asleep now. He lay small and flat, eyes on the slice of light Amy had left. The air tightened across the threshold, thin where it should be soft. He listened hard enough to hurt for the sound she missed. The patient creak of a board carrying something that didn't belong to houses. In the morning, pretense returned with coffee. Amy measured grounds like a spell and chose not to speak of midnight. Mason ate cereal without slurping. His eyes kept pinning the hallway like a pinned moth might study the pin. By afternoon, snow began its quiet rehearsal at the windows. Amy passed the mantel and adjusted the elf out of stubbornness. The head had found that angle again, favoring the hall by a hair. When she turned it forward, a faint tap rolled inside the chest, beaten hollow. Her mouth tasted of metal. She didn't mention it. After dusk, the hallway grew its own weather. The living room light weakened at the doorway's edge. as if the dark beyond drank differently. The air cooled from presence, not climate. Dust along the baseboard seemed to hold a broader shadow than the lamp could account for. Mason paused in the kitchen doorway, unwilling to cross into the warm. He whispered to no one, testing a thought that had lodged like a thorn. If he has one, I may. The faucet drowned him. Night came honest. The outlet timer clicked the tree to black. Amy did a final pass and left the door to Mason's room, cracked the exact width he trusted. He watched that strip of light like he could testify. The house learned to carry something without speaking its name. A slow breath crossed the threshold. Not hers, not his. Fabric whispered. A presence measured the distance from wood to skin and filed it away. Second rule held. The watcher had a hallway now. It wasn't a line anymore. It was a lane, and lanes invite travel. Stay close to the light, my dark hearts. The soil remembers when doors forget to. Rule 3. The ornament and the angle of blame day put a thin glaze over the house and called it comfort. It didn't hold. The breath fogged the glass with every pass. Amy laid out ornaments, cheap globes, dulled by years, bent hooks, one fragile piece that still kept a little light from a better season. Mason orbited the room, careful in the way of a kid who's learned the ground can tilt without warning. Careful, she said, gentler than last night. He nodded, hands tucked, drifting toward the window when the tree's smell felt too close. The sound wasn't loud. It was exact. Glass on hardwood. A bright, clean break that made the room draw inward. Mason? She crossed the rug in 3 strides. He stood rigid, fingers empty, shoulders locked like he'd been braced for this moment all morning. At his feet, the fragile ornament lay in a fan of wet-looking shards. I wasn't trying to, he said, words frayed to threads. I had to. The phrase sat wrong in the air, like a prayer turned inside out. Amy forced breath through the tight place in her chest. Why was it in your hands? His gaze slipped to the coffee table, then back like he regretted it. Her eyes followed the path he'd traced. Dust on the table told its own clear story. A perfect round ring where something had sat without disturbance, written in the soft grey film. And at the edge of that circle, centered like punctuation, the elf. Legs out, hands on knees. Head angled that patient fraction toward the hallway, toward the place rules are enforced. Did you put it there? She asked, softer now. The room had a way of punishing wrong questions. He shook his head. No, it was there. I thought it's not supposed to be, so I was going to put it back. Then it fell. So you picked it up? She heard herself choosing the simpler line, the human one, and you dropped it. He flinched, but he nodded. I didn't mean, but you did. Tired voice, dull edge. The ritual of correction that makes grooves in a house. Did you put it there? She asked, softer now. The room had a way of punishing wrong questions. He shook his head. No, it was there. I thought it's not supposed to be, so I was going to put it back. Then it fell. So you picked it up. She heard herself choosing the simpler line, the human one. And you dropped it. He flinched, but he nodded. I didn't mean, but you did. Tired voice, dull edge. The ritual of correction that makes grooves in a house. You have to stop touching what isn't yours to fix. He folded around the words, small chest, collapsing like a kite in dead wind. His eyes went to the elf without plea, without accusation, just trying to understand the weather. Amy knelt and gathered glass. Each piece chimed in her head the same brittle note. As the bag began to fill, the air at the hallway cooled in that wrong way again. Presence, not draft. The light on the wall thinned like it was being sipped. She tied the plastic hard enough to squeal and set the broken pretty in a dark mouth of trash. By evening, the house put its show back on. TV murmured. The tree blinked a pattern that didn't belong to them yet. Amy did her last pass, and the absence on the mantel startled her a step. She turned toward the table, ready to mutter about being messy with decorations, and stopped. The elf had come home to center, without hands. Exact placement. Body angled that hair toward the hall like a compass, righteous in its north. Mason, she said under her breath, as if saying his name could flatten the bumps. She lifted the elf to face the room. The wood burned cold. A small bead rolled somewhere deep inside when she turned it. That faint tap that made her teeth ache. She set it down with care and pretended she'd imagined it yesterday. Halfway down the hallway, the air forgot how to be air. Dense, held like a mouth filling its cheeks to blow. She cracked Mason's door. He lay curled, eyes closed, in the practiced shape of sleep. The room was colder than the hall. Corner cold. Presence cold. She left the door the exact width he trusted and walked away. She didn't hear the board speak in that new, precise tone. Heel-to-toe patience, pausing just shy of the threshold. She didn't see the shadow darken by a shade that meant more of it existed now. But Mason knew. He watched the doorway, not his dreams. He pulled the blanket higher and understood something adults talk over. Some watchers don't want you good. They want you caught. Third rule settled like frost on a window. Thin, stubborn, quietly undefeated. Ornaments break. Circles hold places. Heads keep their angles even when turned. And blame, heavy as wet wool, finds the smallest shoulders first. The house learned to carry that weight without creaking. The soil remembers. And something at the door began to count. Touch granted, and badness has shelter. Click, click, a small metal voice waking the house. Amy surfaced fast, that parent sense already reaching the door. In the hall, Mason stood at her threshold, head lowered, eyes glassed with that sleepless sheen. His thumb rolled the lighter's wheel, open, shut, not sparking, not playing, rehearsing. Mason, she whispered. The lighter slipped, bit the floor, skittered under the baseboard shadow. Why do you have that? The question knew it wouldn't help. It was on me, he said, tapping his chest once, right over the heart. Placement, not choice. The words came careful and far away, like someone else had measured them for him. Amy saw the red gas can leaned upright by her doorframe. The shed was locked. The night didn't care. She scooped the can, hand shaking, and shut it hard inside the hall closet. The latch clicked like a weak prayer. Back to bed, she said, gentler than she felt. He nodded without argument. Children know when rooms have ears. His room was colder than the hall. Presence cold, the kind that clings to corners and waits. On the dresser, tall and neat and listening, the elf sat where neither of them had left it. Amy moved it to the far side of the couch, as if geography still meant safety. The living room light died by timer, and the house began breathing wrong again, long, low and measured, like something counting. Fabric whispered later. A long breath crossed Mason's threshold, slow and deliberate, the way a tide crosses sand it plans to keep. Amy lay awake, eyes open to a dark that didn't thin, and heard nothing she could name. Mason heard the weight find the foot of his bed and stop. Close to midnight, paper sighed. Amy stepped into the hallway and found him on the floor, back hunched, hair damp with effort, small hands working with patient harm. Torn pages drifted like brittle leaves. A favorite figure lay headless beside him. In his lap, another toy bent the wrong way, plastic groaning. "What are you doing?" She kept her voice low, as if quiet could unmake intention. He didn't look up. "I had to be bad," he whispered. The words hit the house like a nail through joist. "Why?" she asked, kneeling. "He gets closer when I'm good. No drama. Just the measured truth of someone who's tested a rule and catalogued results." "Who?" Amy asked, though the question already knew its answer. He pressed his lips tight, like he'd promised not to say. The broken pieces held to his chest, as if they could shield the beating underneath. She eased the halves from his fingers. "You're tired," she said, trying to give him the human map. New house, new school, big feelings come out sideways. He pulled a stack of crumpled papers closer with a knee, guarding them from her glance. "They're not for now," he said, voice cracking. "Let's sleep," she offered. "We'll fix what we can in the morning." "I don't want to go in there," he said, eyes pinned to the doorway. "You don't hear it?" "Hear what?" "The breathing." She held the hallway light steady with a switch, and her lie steadier in her mouth. "It's the vents," she said. "It's winter." He let her guide him anyway, each step reluctant, like walking against a current with hands on his ankles. She tucked him in. He gripped her wrist with small, bruising fingers. "Don't let him take me," he whispered. "No one is taking you," she said, and left a door the exact width he trusted. She didn't turn to see the elf reappear on the dresser at the level of a sleeping mouth. She didn't hear the long exhale seal the room. In the next hour, her rule hardened. Touch was granted. Not hands, not fingers. Presence. The kind that needled skin, lifted hairs, pressed the blanket while you pretended to sleep. Mason learned what children in old villages once learned. Goodness draws the watcher nearer. So he fed it a different shape. Badness as shelter. Break what you love. Ruin what's safe. Build a small fire of wrongs to keep a larger cold farther away. It worked. For a night. The empty bed, aftermath, and being noticed. The house woke Amy the way a grave wakes the living, by taking heat first. The air in her room bit her lungs. Not draft, not failure, a subtraction. She stepped into the hall. The light she'd left for courage looked thinner, like it had to push through something that had decided to exist. Her bare feet found a seam of cold that ran straight to Mason's door. "Mason?" she called, and the word had no echo. She pushed the door open. Cold leapt at her, the kind that makes breath show even if you don't want to see it. The bed held a small rise where a child should be. She crossed the room in 3 steps and set her hand on the blanket. It didn't give. The fabric kept its shape like a stage set. Her chest knotted. She ripped the covers back. The elf lay tucked under the blanket, wooden head on the pillow, hands crossed on its chest, as if someone had posed it for a viewing. The mouth looked deeper than last night. The carved corners longer, the eyes, those wet-looking hollows, angled up at her like they were savoring. She backed into the dresser. A framed picture clapped the floor. "Mason." Her voice broke the quiet, like brittle glass. Closet, nothing. Under the bed, nothing. Window latched, the toy bin, the hamper, the crawl space panel, nothing. The cold stayed, faithful and exact. She ran the hall, front door, locked, back door, latched. She said his name until it lost its shape. It didn't matter. Names don't open the places that aren't doors. When the police arrived, the house put on a good face. No pry marks, no footprints in new snow, no broken latch, no sign of entry, no sign of exit. They asked the practiced questions. Amy mouthed the practiced answers and tasted metal. They looked at the bed. They looked at the window. They didn't look long at the elf, sitting straight on the dresser, hands on its knees again, mouth a little wider than it had any right to be. Sometimes kids hide, one said. Sometimes they wander. Words like blankets, too small to cover the cold. They left. The radios took the human noise with them. The house breathed the wrong way. Amy stood in the doorway to Mason's room and understood what the air had been saying for days. There had always been more body in that shadow than the lamp could account for. She grabbed the elf with both hands. The wood burned cold, the kind of cold that eats into bones. She carried it outside, to the fire pit under the oak. Her hands shook as she thumbed the lighter. Flame bloomed. She pressed fire to the carved face and watched heat curl bright around it. The wood didn't mark, didn't smoke, didn't even warm. She held the flame longer until her own skin thought better of it. Nothing. She sobbed once, a sound like something breaking in a secret chamber, and shoved the elf into a black trash bag. Not again. Once more until the plastic sighed. She walked it to the curb, lifted the lid, and fed the dark into the darker. "Stay gone," she said, and her voice didn't sound like a voice anymore. Night came without edges. She didn't sleep. Morning tried and failed to hold shape. People came, then stopped coming. Questions came, then stopped being asked. Time pulled thin and translucent. The soil remembers, but it does not return. Winter returned anyway, a hard one. Early ice, blue air. She lived inside a house that had learned to be quiet. On a bleak evening, nearly a year later, she dragged the garbage can to the street. Her head was down. The cold pinched tears out of her eyes and then froze them before they could fall. Movement flickered across the road. She looked up. Across the street, warm light stitched a living room with soft yellow. A small girl decorated a tree, humming a tune with no words. On the table beside her, casual as a mug, sat an elf. Same dark wood, same tilt, same patient mouth. Amy's breath stuttered. No, it couldn't be. Bags get taken. Routes get changed. Fire should mean something. The elf lifted an arm, just a fraction, stiff and certain, and placed a lighter into the girl's hand. Amy moved, body deciding before thought. Ice took her foot, and the pavement answered with pain. She tried to rise and couldn't. Inside the warm square, the girl studied flame like a gift. Flick. Fire woke, like it loves to. Dry needles curled black, a ribbon ignited. Lights popped with tiny hard sounds. The tree became a torch. The girl stared, entranced by the thing that eats and sings. The elf turned its head. Slowly, smoothly. It found Amy through glass and flame and cold. Those hollows held her. Fire made the mouth deeper, jagged at the edges, a grin that wasn't cut so much as revealed. Two thoughts hit her at once, hard and final. He hadn't been following Mason. He had been leading him. And this wasn't about a house. It was about a rule that likes new rooms. She crawled, knees biting eyes, voice tearing itself down to a single purpose. Emma. Her mouth shaped the other child's name like it could change a current after it's chosen a riverbed. Inside, shadows flared orange. Outside, the cold bit, patient as ever. The watcher had been noticed. It likes that. Oh, what a naughty, nasty little elf. Sneaking, watching, worming its way into a child's trust. Some creatures earn coal. But this one, it summoned a darkness that didn't come for joy. Keep your lights low, your courage high, and I'll be waiting in the next story.